What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Quill and Hammer, Reforging Fiction. I'm Trevor.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Zach.
This is our second episode. If you missed the first one, we are reforging fiction here. We're going to take our favorite books, movies, video games, anything we want, and we're going to explain how we would make them better, go through what needs improvement, what was already great, and we will fix everything that is wrong with our favorite things. Last week, we were talking about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and how we would fix that. Now, Zach, remind me, we said we needed a few different things to make that more engaging, and we decided we were going to frame it like Star Wars, or not Star Wars, Lord of the Rings extended editions. Rather than cut much out, we're going to extend the time and add things in. So, can you remind me what we talked about last week?
Right. Well, I think the problem that we identified with the Phantom Menace is that there's so much going on, but so little time that you miss out on a lot of things. So number one, and I think the most important for me was to make Darth Maul actually a menace, show him terrorizing the people. And then adjacent to that, number two was that you have to give some weight to the invasion of Naboo, show the carnage that's happening to the people rather than just droids inside the temple where no one is, right? And then last that we talked about was showing the manipulation of Palpatine. It's very behind the scenes of what he's doing. He suddenly becomes chancellor, and obviously you assume there's been some manipulation, some political espionage, if you will, but we don't get to see that. And in addition, last thing was that we wish we could have had a little bit of an introduction to Count Dooku to make his role in Attack of the Clones a little more engaging, a little more relevant.
Perfect. That I thought we fixed it. I
I
thought
thought
we
so
did.
too.
So, using that as a bridge, let's get into the meat of what we're talking about today. Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. Now, first I want to talk about what was done well in Attack of the Clones.
You know, I love Attack of the Clones, but out of it's hard to say. Obviously, Revenge of the Sith is number one out of the prequel trilogy. One and two are kind of neck and neck. There are good things, and it's simultaneously more fast paced and also slower than The Phantom Menace. But I think what I enjoyed the most about Attack of the Clones was Obi-Wan's arc, where he's investigating and uncovering the plot that Palpatine has been laying down. That was what was most engaging to me. It was the mystery, the unknown, and trying to find out why is Padme being targeted? Why am I going to Camino? Where did this bounty hunter come from? And then it culminates with the battle at Geonosis, which I actually really enjoyed.
Right. I I know last time we talked about Darth Maul and the how we felt when that episode or not, when he shows up and he has the double-bladed lightsaber and he ignites both of them and that fight scene was fantastic. Again, going back to the lightsabers, I loved the fight between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Count Dooku, and then Yoda and Count Dooku. I thought that was a fantastic fight scene. And I don't know if you remember, if you were what, 7 years old when it came out, but I remember watching Yoda just do something more than hobble, and it was the coolest thing you've ever seen in your life.
It was one of the biggest subversions of expectations that I think I've ever enjoyed as much as I have. I mean, you don't expect that from Yoda, and then he just becomes this master swordsman. And in fact, I love going back and rewatching it. There's a little bit of foreshadowing in the speeder chase with Obi-Wan and Anakin in the beginning. Um, Obi-Wan makes some comment to Anakin saying, you know, if you put this much effort into your training, you'd rival Master Yoda as a swordsman. And it's super quick, and you don't really notice it until you rewatch it again after seeing him take on Count Dooku, which is just it's cinema excellence is what it is.
Right. No, I 100% agree. And I loved that. I love the little things that kind of foreshadow. I think that's super fun. But after that, let's jump into what are some things that clearly didn't work or need fixing, or how can we take it from a good movie that we really like to an excellent masterpiece?
Well, I think the elephant in the room is the romance between Anakin and Padme. Now, I don't know what the general opinion is on that whole arc, but regardless of whether you thought it was okay, if you thought it was too corny, if you thought it was the cringiest thing you've ever seen, it needed to happen. You had to show them falling in love because that was central to Anakin's turn to the dark side. If he didn't love Padme, he wouldn't have cared. He wouldn't have been tempted to go with Palpatine, right? But I don't know. What do you think? How would you make the romance between the two of them more authentic or maybe less cringe?
It now romance movies are not my expertise. So I'm not sure how you would do it, but but I know it's possible because think of how many romance movies there are out there that convince all of the I don't want to say all the women folk in our lives, but the ladies of the world that love romance, the men of the world that love romance movies, like I don't know, in my mind it's like a how to lose a guy in 10 days kind of thing where like yeah, it's kind of implausible, but then of course they do fall in love. They have to. In my mind, I'm viewing it as, do you remember the movie What About Dan?
Yes.
And he ends up falling for the girl in a weekend and then they get married. And like, I think you need something like that, where if you remember, they get together, they have a real conversation, but they don't know each other. And then she shows up at the family reunion as the boyfriend or the girlfriend of his brother.
Hmm.
And so, like, there's this dynamic of like, she's the forbidden fruit kind of thing. He can't pursue her even though he felt they had a connection. She's with the brother. She's learning that Dan is a really good guy, kind of more the person that she thought she wanted to be with. I feel like you need something like that in in here. But I don't know how to do that and construct it in a way that that seems to fit, because you're right, you need that relationship because that is the start of his downfall. He gets attached to Padme, and then not that attachment is necessarily bad because Qui-Gon, his entire thought was like you can get attached but you got to be able to let it go. It's
Right.
not eschew all attachments, it's accept the living force as it is.
Right.
But you know, his attachment and his fear of losing Padme, like he lost his mom, like he lost everything in his life, like he lost Qui-Gon, like that fear drives him to do what he does. And somehow you have to show that better. And I think you can do some dialogue in there that isn't I hate sand or whatever he says.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Right.
Like the little kind of awkward things, you can twist it so that it's not awkward, so that it's ends up being kind of sweet and whatever, and then you understand why at the end of the film they are falling in love, but it just seems kind of awkward and corny a little bit.
I think again we run into the same problem where you need to show that they're falling in love, but you run out of time. You run out of time because you still have to set everything up with Obi-Wan, and then you have to introduce Count Dooku. It's there's so many things going on again that things miss out. Um, well, what do you think if you could change it? Would you still have Padme and Anakin not have seen each other for 10 years? Or would you make Padme a senator right away and imply that they had been not in contact, but they'd been working together like they do in the Clone Wars, where the Jedi are working with the senators and they're involved in the politics and they're working together on bills, that sort of thing. Would you Do you think that would have been more plausible that the relationship had been growing for 10 years? Or would you keep it where they hadn't seen each other for 10 years, Anakin was obsessed, and Padme hadn't thought about him in all that time?
You know, I'm of two minds because I like the idea that they have been in contact and that their relationship had been growing. And I think that's how you, maybe not how you fix it, but it's definitely an option. But like on the other hand, the Jedi and Obi-Wan is, he was more of a traditionalist Jedi than Qui-Gon was. And I don't see him allowing that to happen. And they're out and
True.
they're doing missions, and we don't know how long she was the queen for, but we know that, Naboo has a monarchy, but it's an elected monarchy. So her term ran out. They made her a senator, but we don't know how long she was a senator.
Right.
I think answering some of those questions would be helpful, but I think having some form of contact earlier to keep them together makes his, can we call it an infatuation at the start of the movie, better?
Hmm. I mean, I tend to think so too. Um, Another thing that I thought about that might fix a little bit of this romance is show them interacting with other people. You think about what made you fall in love with your wife, what made me fall in love with my wife is, yeah, you have those moments where it's just the two of you, which is all we see in Attack of the Clones. But part of it is the way that they interact with others. That's when you see the character of people. And so I don't know if you show them walking through the streets of the town and Anakin shows some compassion to somebody, or stops to take care, kind of like a good Samaritan thing, stops to take care of somebody who just got mugged instead of running after the culprit type deal, right?
Mhm.
And show maybe some of that interplay. And then the other thing I was thinking was, the whole point of Anakin being there is that he's supposed to be her bodyguard, right? Well, why don't we show them getting into a fight? The classic trope is that the female falls in love with the male after he saves her, you know what I mean, type deal. And at the risk of downplaying Padme's strengths, she's a strong character. You see that through um, her willingness to fight, her willingness to stand up in the Senate. She is a strong character, but that doesn't mean she can't still be saved. She can't be put in a dangerous situation and be saved by her potential love interest, right? That's one of the classic things that we see in movies. And I don't think that would have been a bad thing to throw in there.
I agree with you there because that interaction, especially, yeah, saving, that is a trope, but I like the idea of them interacting. Like they're out in the countryside with other people. They go through a town. I would like to see Anakin, and maybe this is a flaw of the movies because we don't have time to get into it, but maybe showing off some different force powers other than in a martial capacity. The only
Right,
time we see him do anything, we see anyone do anything with the force other than fight is that little cut the pear scene.
right,
And if you had seen him catch something that was dropped from a window and force lift it back up to a person, or save a little boy falling from a tree, or
right,
something simple like that that would show Anakin's compassion and his good side, the charming part of him, then you would get to being able to overlook the monster side of him that she sees.
right.
And I
When
think that's one of the things that gets in the way of the plausibility is all you see is the too few minutes alone, that awkward like dress that she wears at night where she's like trying to seduce him with the dress, but at the same time, no, we can't do this.
right,
And then the next thing you know, he's killing all the sand people and she's just like, okay,
this is okay.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I think, and again, I think that's a problem that arose because you run out of time.
yeah,
Again, you know, you have to show that Anakin has that darkness in him. He's Darth Vader. You have to foreshadow that. That's the point of the prequels, is to show how he fell to the dark side. And you have to show that it was plausible in the first place by showing that he has these deep, dark tendencies, right? But at the expense of doing that, or the expense of doing that, is you don't get to see why Padme would find him appealing in the first place. And I thought about the reaction to his mother's death and killing all the sand people, throwing his tantrum, and you think like, oh wow, like what woman would be attracted to that kind of thing? You know what I mean? But my thought is, and I don't think you get to see this, but at that point she had already started to care for him deeply, because they immediately go to Geonosis, get captured, and she reveals her love for him, right? So at that point it had already grown. And what Padme is seeing is that the person she loves is hurting. Yeah, maybe he threw a tantrum, maybe he did this horrible thing, but what she sees is he's just had his heart destroyed, and I want to be there for him. I want to comfort him. And you don't get to see that because, again, you run out of time. You run out of time for that subplot. And so it's just meant to be inferred.
right. So let's shift from that to a little more broad outlook. We start with the very opening scene is Padme's ship coming down. She has her decoy, and the ship blows up.
I guess I was wrong. There was no danger at all.
I would like to see a little, like, I'm fine with that being the opening sequence, but I would like to see some more interaction between, why is Count Dooku after her? A little more of the political intrigue. I would like some more interaction between Darth Sidious and the rest of
Right.
everyone. But you don't know that Darth Sidious and Count Dooku are in cahoots necessarily until they happen. But I would like to see some interaction maybe between Count Dooku and these other worlds, a little bit of a speech that he makes somewhere, some context to why the separatists are becoming separatists, right?
Right, right. And I think, again, that's another thing that you miss. And it's a product of the 10-year gap, I think. Obviously things have been happening in that time. And why do they want to secede? Why do they want to be separate? They obviously want independence, but what is that going to gain them? What's the problem in the republic that they are seeing? And if you can illustrate that, then it makes the separatist movement a little more sympathetic. You can have a little more sympathy towards it. And the best villains, the best evils are the ones where you can see how they got there. It's easy to look at Darth Maul immediately and say, oh, yeah, he's a bad dude. He looks like a devil. He acts like a devil. He kills people. He's a bad dude. But it's not until you go through the Clone Wars that you see, oh, well, he grew up in a warrior society where the men are expelled from the village and they have to fend for themselves in a hostile environment. And then this Darth Sidious came and tortured him and molded him into the weapon that he is. And it's like, yeah, well, you begin to have some sympathy for him, not for what he's done, but for how he got there, right? And so I think you're right. I would love to see some more of the political side of it. Why are these things happening? Why did Count Dooku head it up, right?
And I would like to see Darth Sidious involved and playing both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Where, you mentioned the Clone Wars, the series, you can see, and of course, again, like we said last episode, we all know that Palpatine and Sidious are the same person. We know
Right.
that that is, that's going on. It's not a secret, but it's a secret from everyone on screen, and I would like to see that play out more. Him playing the sides, him manipulating the Trade Federation and the Geonesians, everyone, whoever. There are, as we learn in the Clone Wars, hundreds of planets that are involved, and you have all these leaders and things, and it's like, what happened? Why is this happening? If we were to add some context to that, then it gives more weight to them leaving and seceding from the Republic rather than it's like, okay, there's this big problem now, go fix it.
Right.
We're gonna have a war. It's like, well, show me after Padme leaves why an Outer Rim world is so ready to get out of here, or why Sereno is having a real big problem, Sereno being Count Dooku's planet.
Right.
Why that's being, why it's such a big issue for them there, and another world. Just, you can do a brief, 5-minute thing on a world, and Count Dooku is there, and he's seeing all of the problems, and he can be, like I said, maybe give a speech or try and help and paint him as the the good Jedi that left because he felt the Jedi Order were being manipulated or whatever by something, or that they had fallen, and he could do more good in the world as a politician than as just one Jedi fighting against an entire organization.
Right. And last thing about Sidious and seeing his interplay, that he had to have the war to fulfill his plan of creating the army executing Order 66 and turning the Republic into the Empire. And so I would love to see him again manipulating. I love a villain who uses manipulation. It's subtle and it's real to me. But I would love to see him manipulating the leaders of these worlds that are in the separatist movement, right? And whispering into their ears, either directly or through agents. You know, I would love to see that sort of thing, because the revelation at the end of Revenge of the Sith is that all of this has been orchestrated by Palpatine, like 13, 14 years in the making, or even longer, that he has waited and laid his plans. And you don't really get that sense, even in Revenge of the Sith, that it's been that long of a plan. And to be able to see all of these steps, I think would shed some light on how brilliant Palpatine actually is and how sadistic he actually is, to be able to lay out this plan for that long, that perfectly.
I agree 100%. The thing that we fail to see is that side. We're more in the, following Obi-Wan on his investigation, which is fantastic. You have the whole love scene and the subplot with Anakin's mom, and then they somehow, they get to the Geonesian fight and all of that. But I feel like you need something that will show how it was all orchestrated.
Right.
And I know we said we would like to know a bit more about what happened in between the two movies, and maybe that will be another episode of things that we would need to see or whatever. And but we wanted to end with some manipulation, how he gets in there, and then you've got 10 years of him being chancellor. And then how does he keep extending?
Right.
The war starts, more emergency powers. How did they manipulate? I mean, think of it this way. They manipulated the Jedi and the entire situation with Naboo, where Jar Jar is the representative or whatever, and he's the one that calls. I'd like to see a little bit more of that interplay. Like,
right.
How did he manipulate Senator Amidala to leave Jar Jar, who is more susceptible to manipulation and things, not necessarily the sharpest tool in the shed. So, yeah.
On that point, this might be a little bit of a deviation. What do you think about Darth Jar Jar? We've all heard the fan theory. We've seen all the theory videos. What do you actually think about it? Do you think it would have been a good idea, a way to explain away his buffoonery, or is it just nonsense?
I feel like it's nonsense. It's funny to think about.
Right.
It is, but I don't think that's I don't think it's plausible enough to really give it any weight.
Right. But it is funny to think about.
It is funny to think about, but he's just not. I don't know. It would be the perfect, here's this idiot of a Gungan who seemingly pops up out of nowhere, and like it's just too coincidental.
Right.
Especially when like you would have to show that he was a Sith before, that Palpatine had trained him or whatever, or I don't know. It just doesn't, like when you think about it, he's just there and he runs into Qui-Gon and then he seemingly has all the answers, but he's an idiot, so you don't suspect. Like it makes sense, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm with you. But Just another funny thing to think about.
It absolutely is. But getting back to the actual plot, how would you show that he's manipulating the, behind the scenes more Sidious, not Jar Jar?
I'm not sure what you would do. That's where my ideas are falling short. Um, Maybe you have him manipulating trade lines, and a planet is in a crisis, or there's a natural disaster crisis, and because of legislation or other problems going on in the Senate, they don't send resources fast enough, or something like that. Reasons for people to be slighted against the governing body. Like I said, I don't have very good ideas. This particular idea. It's just kind of being made up on the fly for me, but I would think it would have to be something like that. You would have to show why they would be better off on their own, and why everybody would be better off on their own with fewer um, large government restrictions type deal.
Right. And I think the problem with, if I can deviate to the Senate, is that there's no real, like, I don't know. We're from the United States. There are checks and balances. You have, our Senate and the House of Representatives, and then the judicial branch and whatever, and it's all meant to like keep things in check. And yeah, things move slowly at times, but no one power can get too, out of control or whatever. But the way that the Republic works is one world gets one vote. And then at a certain point, they decide that they're going to let people like the Trade Federation, which are companies, not planets, have a vote. And so you've got this coalition of companies who are trying to impose on, their will on the Senate. And then you can see, if you show Sidious manipulating those groups, and then the other, I don't know. I don't know what planets are out there, but other planet systems, and he can be like, don't you see how this is happening or whatever? And
Mm-hmm.
and you can see a mixture of manipulation and blackmail and all of this other stuff, the fear that forces these people to do what Sidious wants, and that shows the deadlock in the Senate, and how he's manipulating both sides so he can stand up in front of them and say, as Chancellor Palpatine, we need this. And then you go into the next room or the next scene, and it's, him being manipulative and shady, and, he's there in the Sidious hood, and you can't see his
Right.
face, but you know who he is, and all of that. And you can see him manipulate and kind of scoff at the Senate because he's just playing it like an
He's toying
orchestra.
with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be how you would have to do it. But again, that's kind of a slower plot. It's less engaging. And I think the trick with all cinema is, how do you get through those slower moments? It's easier in a book when you can have, 10,000 pages. Maybe that's too much. I don't know how long books are. I listen to audiobooks, not read. But you have more words, more time to work with. You can have those slower moments. But in a film, when you're trying to show those things, you have to make it engaging somehow. And honestly, I don't know how you balance that. And I think that's another problem, and another reason why we don't get to see some of these things is George Lucas has to make a decision on what's going to be engaging. What plot points do I leave to be inferred? Which do I have to explicitly show? And what's going to engage the audience the most?
Exactly. Well, I agree with you there. The problem that George Lucas had is trying to balance good, engaging cinema with the plot and things that need to happen. And in my mind, I can see Palpatine saying these things, and then you switch to a world and you can see like fighting or something happening, like
Right.
I will, and just hypothetically, you can say, well, something about the trade routes and whatever. And then you can see a Trade Federation ship going down a trade route and fighting with someone, or, whatever.
You
Or,
know, that's actually an interesting idea. Have Palpatine or Sidious's voiceover on top of a separate scene showing sort of the opposite, right? Like I'll make the trade routes safe, but instead of making them safe, he's the one that's, I don't know, implementing the danger or something like that. Have some dissonance between it, but show the manipulation. I think you can manipulate in a couple of ways. You can promise things or you can threaten, right? But anyway, sorry to cut you off.
no, that's my point. I think you can show that, and it doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be this long-winded political thing, but you can show action on top of the bureaucracy, and you know you can, and I'm not sure how I would do it, because you could have him talking in the Senate about a problem, and then going through, like, maybe just listing, these are the problems that we need to fix and let's do it, and then you switch over to Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious doing his manipulation and saying the exact opposite. And once again, we all know it's the same person.
Right.
You can see him manipulating senators or manipulating whatever. And maybe it doesn't have to be a large group, but you can have him meeting with one group of senators while something's going on. And then you can have this like chain of events where like Palpatine is there talking to some senators, and then Darth Sidious is talking to a group of people and manipulating it in the background to do the opposite of that. And then Palpatine addresses that, and just like a quick 5 minute montage of him talking and, making a deal with his right hand, and in the left hand just stabbing everyone in the back and doing whatever he can. And I think that would solve it, and you could have that manipulation there and see his ruthlessness, and once again
Hmm.
see him being the menace, the
Right.
phantom menace, really. That would be an ideal way to do it, in my opinion.
I agree. And just it gives more weight to who he is. It fleshes him out and really makes him someone that you hate because he's evil. It shows that he's evil. But alas, we don't have time. We don't have
We
time
don't
to
have the time.
show
That's
all those things.
exactly, that's where this extended edition comes in, and what we would
Right.
add,
Right.
because we need that weight, we need that payoff, we need to see all of these different things coming together, because that's how it works. That's okay. That's how it works. You have to see all of these different things happening, or it doesn't really work together.
Right.
So I would like to see that. I would like to see Palpatine manipulating. And here's the thing. You need to see consequences. And yeah, we see the Jedi dying at the end. We see the Padme's handmaiden die, her decoy die at the beginning, but you really need to see a bit of a darker tone in this movie. You need to see battle droids maybe killing civilians on a different
Right.
planet, or or a bomb exploding or something happening on these worlds that gives weight to it. It's like, okay, our people are dying. We need to do something to really fix this problem because the government isn't doing it because
Right.
everyone has a vote and everyone's doing their own interests and no one really cares, you know?
Right.
So I feel like that's in a nutshell. You need to see that in order to make it work better and see once again the emotional payoff of at the end of the movie, Count Dooku gets away, the war starts, and then you see all the troops at the end, and you're like, oh crap.
Right.
You know, you get that the Empire Strikes Back feeling of like it didn't work out the way that we did or that we wanted it, and we don't know what's going on. And then you see Count Dooku unite with Darth Sidious, and you realize they were together all along,
The whole time.
the
Yep.
whole time.
Yep.
So in summary, the things that we need, and stop me if I'm missing anything, we need the weight of the other worlds and the manipulation of Palpatine to get them into the state that it's in. You need to see him manipulating these worlds, causing destruction, pushing them to the brink of war, and really seeing why they want to separate. And then you need to see him, on the other hand, being Senator Palpatine and trying to be that compassionate good guy that he comes off as because he's trying to be the wise leader of the galaxy. And then you need to mix all of that in there. You need to see Dooku doing the same thing, trying to be that good hero guy that's there for the little guy, the world. It's like, this is why I left the Jedi kind of thing.
Right.
And so he's going around trying to fix everything. And then you need to see a bit more of Anakin and Padme falling in love because that just doesn't feel plausible, but we want to see them interacting more. We want to see Anakin's good side and his charm and why she might fall in love with him and interacting with real people.
Right.
And then, of course, we really like Obi-Wan's investigation. I think that was done really well. And all of that leads up to the final battle with the Geonesians and Count Dooku and all of the Jedi getting together and everyone about to die. And then here comes Yoda with the clothes.
Right.
And then it ends with the separatists running away and Count Dooku, going off on his own direction and the war starting. And here's something else. I would like a brief introduction of General Grievous.
Yes, that was something we didn't get to. I would have much rather had him introduced in the Clone Wars rather than or Attack of the Clones rather than in the Clone Wars.
Right, because we don't even know who he is. And then it's the same thing in Revenge of the Sith. General Grievous is here and you don't even know who he is.
Right.
But introduce him as one of the co-conspirators or whatever, and then you have the battle going on and everything, and you end with the epic lightsaber battle that they all kind of lose, and there isn't really a winner, and Obi-Wan's got his arms, he can't really stand up or move or whatever, and then you've got Anakin with his arm cut off and everything, and you kind of just, it all comes together the way it should. The wedding, the Count Dooku going to Darth Sidious and meeting up, and you realize that he was a Sith all along too, and they were both manipulating things, and then the Jedi still not knowing, and just being super uneasy, but then you see the entire clone army there in Coruscant and you just realize this is horrible. And you
Right.
have that, like, you know, like I said, the Empire Strikes Back feeling where it's just this dark, wow, we just kind of got hit in the jaw by the Empire. We just got hit in the jaw by the Sith to do something that we don't want to do.
Right.
Am I missing anything?
No, I think those elements would elevate the Clone Wars right up to a 10.
Right. Now my last question before we end, is there anything you would add to bridge the gap between here and Revenge of the Sith? Anything that you need to add in there that foreshadows, or assuming no one has seen the Clone Wars animated series,
Mm.
what needs to bridge the gap?
Well, I think the most important we've already touched on is General Grievous. If you can show that he's a threat, then his implied carnage that he's been creating in, when we catch up with him in the opening sequence of Revenge of the Sith, I think that kind of glues it together. If you're gonna erase the Clone Wars, I think that's the most important thing. You have to have Dooku being the mastermind and show him in the Clone Wars, show him sending Grievous out to do dirty work, sort of in the same way how we said Palpatine should have been sending Maul out to do his dirty work and to cause death and carnage and whatnot. I think that's what would connect them better and make the urgency of, yeah, Grievous has Palpatine. We have to go save him. It makes that more urgent. It puts more of a time clock on things. If you understand how bad of a dude General Grievous is, and then here's the situation right when you start.
Right. I agree. I think that's the one thing that you can add, because you do set up everything pretty well, especially with all the additions that we added in.
Right.
But I feel like you really need Grievous to be out there being the destructive side of things, while Count Dooku is the diplomatic one or whatever.
The puppet master, so to speak.
Absolutely. Well, I like you. I think we did a fantastic job. Granted, that's just us. So if any of you listening have any opinions, or if we've missed anything that would make it better, like we said, we're doing an extended edition just like Lord of the Rings. So if there's anything you can think of that to add in, comment below, send us a message, let us know what we could do to really take Attack of the Clones and Star Wars in general to a 10 out of 10 all across the board, every movie. So let us know in the comments, message us, whatever you've got to do to let us know. But we think we did a pretty good job. Anything to add, Zeke?
I don't think so. I think we're good. We've been Quill and Hammer, and we've been Reforging Fiction.
Catch you next time, everyone.